On the morning of May 18th, 1980, a mountain in Washington state did something no one alive had ever seen. In a single minute, it blew itself apart, erased over 1,000 feet of its own summit, flattened a forest the size of a city, and turned day into total darkness for people hundreds of miles away. This is the story of the day the sky went black, and why it could happen again, a lot closer to home than you think. For 123 years, Mount St. Helens was quiet, postcard perfect, a snow-capped, symmetrical cone that people called the Mount Fuji of America. But underneath that calm, pressure was building. Then, in March of 1980, the mountain woke up. It started with an earthquake, magnitude 4.2, then hundreds more. On March 27th, the summit cracked open with a blast of steam, punching a brand new crater into the ice. For weeks, the mountain hissed and rumbled and coughed up ash, at one point averaging an eruption every hour. But the scariest sign wasn't the noise. It was the bulge. Scientists watching the north face realized the entire side of the mountain was swelling outward, pushing out as much as 5 feet every single day. Deep inside, magma was rising, and the mountain was literally inflating like a balloon. Everyone knew something was coming. Nobody knew exactly when. This is where it gets human. Geologists set up watch posts to study that bulge, knowing the danger. One of them was a 30-year-old volcanologist named David Johnston, who had fought hard to keep people away from the mountain because he understood just how deadly it could be. He volunteered for the closest observation post, about 6 miles out. Not everyone listened. Harry Truman, no, not the president, was an 83-year-old man who'd run a lodge at the foot of the mountain for 54 years. When authorities begged him to leave, he refused. He'd lived with that mountain his whole life, and he wasn't going anywhere. Sunday, May 18th, 8:32 in the morning, a magnitude 5.1 earthquake struck directly beneath the volcano, and the entire bulging north face, weakened for weeks, broke loose all at once. It became the largest landslide in recorded history, an entire side of a mountain gone in seconds. And that's what unleashed the catastrophe. With all that pressure suddenly released, the volcano exploded sideways, a lateral blast that tore across the land at more than 600 miles an hour, nearly the speed of sound. A scorching cloud of gas and rock, hundreds of degrees hot, incinerating everything in its path. It leveled 230 square miles of forest in minutes. Full-grown trees snapped like matchsticks and laid flat in neat rows, all pointing away from the mountain. Then came the ash. A column of it punched straight up, 15 miles into the sky in just 15 minutes. David Johnston, at his post, got out one final radio call. "Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it." He was never seen again. Harry Truman and his lodge were buried under hundreds of feet of debris. In all, 57 people died that day. Most weren't killed by lava, they were killed by the blast itself and by breathing in the searing ash. And here's the chilling part. It was a Sunday. If the mountain had waited one more day, logging crews would have been working inside the blast zone. The toll could have been in the hundreds or thousands. Now, the ash. This is where the eruption reached ordinary people. Carried east on the wind at 60 miles an hour, the cloud swallowed the sky. By noon, Spokane, 250 miles away, was in total darkness, drivers stranded, unable to see a few feet ahead. The eruption roared for 9 straight hours, dumping 540 million tons of ash across 11 states. Right here in Wenatchee, and all across eastern Washington, people woke to a gray world, ash piling up like snow on cars and rooftops. And within 2 weeks, the finest ash had drifted all the way around the entire planet. When the dust finally settled, Mount St. Helens was 1,300 feet shorter. Where a proud symmetrical peak once stood, there was now a gaping horseshoe crater a mile wide. Nearly 7,000 large animals were gone, whole forests flattened. The damage topped $1 billion. In a matter of hours, one mountain had rewritten the entire landscape. And here's the part that should get your attention. Mount St. Helens isn't alone. It sits on the Cascade Range, a chain of volcanoes running from California to British Columbia, part of the Ring of Fire that circles the Pacific. Mount Baker, Glacier Peak, Mount Adams, Mount Hood, and the giant of them all, Mount Rainier. So when will they erupt? Here's the honest truth. Nobody can give you a date. Volcanoes don't run on a schedule, and anyone selling you a countdown is guessing. What scientists can tell you is the risk. On average, the Cascades produce a major eruption about 2 or 3 times a century. Every one of these mountains is wired with sensors and watched around the clock by the U.S. Geological Survey. Just this past summer, July of 2025, Mount Rainier had a swarm of over 1,300 tiny earthquakes. Scientists watched it closely and kept the alert level at a calm green. The point isn't that an eruption is around the corner. The point is that these mountains are alive, and we are watching them. So what can you actually do, more than you'd think? First, know your zone. If you live in a valley downstream of one of these volcanoes, find out if you're in a hazard area. Second, have a plan and a go bag. Water, a mask for ash, a few days of supplies. Third, during ashfall, stay inside, protect your lungs, and don't drive unless you must. Ash destroys engines and turns roads to slick paste. And fourth, the big one. If the authorities tell you to go, go. That's the lesson of Harry Truman. The mountain doesn't care how long you've lived there. Which brings us to the scary what if. What if Mount Rainier erupted today? Here's the twist. Rainier's deadliest threat isn't ash, and it isn't even lava. It's mud. Rainier is buried under more ice and snow than every other Cascade volcano combined. Melt that ice fast, in an eruption, or even from the mountain simply collapsing under its own weight, and you get a lahar, a churning river of mud, rock, and debris that moves like wet concrete at 45 miles an hour and flattens everything it touches. And here's the truly unsettling part. A lahar doesn't need an eruption at all. Rainier has done it before. A wall of mud called the electron mudflow buried the land around present-day Ording about 500 years ago, with no eruption to warn anyone. Today, roughly 60,000 people live in that path. If a major lahar began tomorrow, some towns might have as little as 30 minutes to reach high ground. Scientists put it bluntly. If you live in that valley, your home is more likely to be destroyed by a lahar than by a fire. That's why towns like Orting run lahar drills. In one recent year, 45,000 students practiced racing uphill to safety. And why warning sirens now line those valleys. Because the siren might be the only warning you get. The mountains of the Pacific Northwest are some of the most beautiful places on Earth. But they aren't sleeping. They're waiting. On May 18, 1980, Mount St. Helens reminded us who's really in charge. And someday, another one of them will do the same. The good news? Unlike 1980, this time we're watching. And now, so are you. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.